3 years of hell. Then I got my revenge on my landlord. I don't use the word hell lightly, but that's exactly what the last 3 years of my life felt like. Every single day I spent in that apartment came with a new problem, a new insult, a new reason to lose faith in people. And the man responsible for it all? My landlord, if you could even call him that. Calling him a human being honestly feels too generous. He made it his mission to make my life miserable. From the very beginning, there were signs. It started with little things, petty theft, arguments over minor issues, but over time, it spiraled into something darker. He stole from me, not just once, and not something small. My dryer disappeared one day from the shared laundry area. Household items I bought and left in common spaces, gone. No explanation, no apologies, just gone. And it was always him. Then came the money games. One time, I had to deal with a plumbing issue, something clearly caused by old pipes and years of neglect. A clear case of wear and tear. But instead of handling it like any responsible property owner would, he pinned the repair bill on me. Hundreds of dollars. I didn't have a choice. I paid it, furious and helpless. And because of that unexpected cost, I was a couple days late with rent the following month. Just once. The only time in 3 whole years. And what did he do? He retaliated. Sent me a passive-aggressive letter about my parking spot, then tried to slap on an extra $150 a month. Like I was the problem. There were moments I felt like I was losing my mind. He tried breaking into my place at least once that I know of. God knows how many times he tried when I wasn't home. Every knock on the door sent my heart racing. Every email or letter from him felt like a new threat. And I need you to understand. I was a good tenant. I paid rent on time, religiously. I never caused trouble. I didn't complain or make unreasonable demands. I just wanted to live in peace. But peace was the one thing this man refused to give me. I kept a lot of this pain to myself over the years, telling myself it wasn't worth the legal battle or the drama. But deep down, I knew something had to give. One day, I'd get my chance. One day, I'd make sure he answered for what he did. And when that day came, I made sure he never saw it coming. You might think, well, at least the apartment was nice, right? I wish. That would have made this whole nightmare at least slightly more bearable. But no. This place was a disaster. A slum dressed up with a fresh coat of lies. Let's start with the plumbing. I later found out it wasn't just bad. It was illegal. Pipes that weren't up to code. Leaks that went ignored. And a system so old and patched together that it was a miracle water even came out of the faucets. Every shower felt like a gamble. Would I get water? Or would I flood the place? And then there was the porch. The one that looked like it might collapse if a strong breeze hit it. It had been like that for years. Rotted wood, unstable railing, huge safety hazard. And he knew it. He just didn't care. He never fixed it, never warned me, never even acknowledged the danger. I avoided it as much as I could, but every time I stepped out there, I did it with my heart in my throat. Inside the apartment wasn't any better. The ceiling paint peeled constantly, like it was trying to escape just as badly as I was. I'd wake up and find flakes of paint on my bed, my clothes, my hair. There were times I looked around and wondered if this place was even legally habitable. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The gas heater, not up to code, not even close. Every time I turned it on, I prayed it wouldn't blow up or poison me in my sleep. I did everything I could to keep the place safe, used space heaters, kept windows cracked, avoided certain outlets. But there's only so much you can do when the person who's supposed to maintain the building is actively making it worse. And still, for 3 years, I stayed. I don't even know why anymore. Maybe because moving is expensive, maybe because I kept hoping it would get better, maybe because I didn't want to admit I was stuck. Whatever the reason, I endured it. And through it all, I paid rent, on time, every month. Except for that one time when he forced me to cover the plumbing repair. That one time was all he needed to start punishing me, like I'd broken some sacred oath. But really, it was never about the rules or the rent. It was always about control. He wanted power over me, and he thought he had it until he went too far. There's a limit to how much a person can take. And for me, that limit came in the form of a letter slipped under my door. I remember it so clearly. Thick envelope, typed with his usual arrogant tone, like he was doing me a favor by even informing me. Inside was the notice. My rent was going up by $500 a month. $500. Not because the apartment had been renovated, not because the building improved, not because of inflation or rising costs, just because he could. That's how people like him operate. They squeeze every last penny they can until you either bleed dry or snap. And that day, I snapped. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't tired. I was furious. After 3 years of silence, I had finally reached my breaking point. And for once, I realized something important. I had nothing left to lose. So I made a decision. One that had been simmering quietly in the back of my mind for years. I was done living like this. Done letting him win. It was time to move. Not just physically, emotionally, legally, mentally. I was going to leave, yes, but I was also going to fight back. And that's when the idea came to me. What if I made a call before I left? What if Instead of walking away in defeat, I left, behind a little gift. He thought he could bully me out and pocket an extra $500. What he didn't know was that I was about to cost him far, far more than that. It was time to introduce him to someone he couldn't intimidate, the building inspector. 4 days before my lease ended, I picked up the phone and dialed the local building department. My voice was calm, clear, controlled, but inside, I was burning. I told the inspector everything. Years of abuse poured out of me like floodwater breaching a dam. I didn't hold back. I started with the porch, the rotted, splintering death trap he finally replaced without a permit. Not only was it still unsafe, it was completely illegal. The inspector took notes. Then the plumbing. Pipes that moaned and sputtered, installed by God knows who, and absolutely not to code. He didn't even blink when I said illegal. He just kept writing. The gas heater? Dangerous and outdated. I didn't know the exact laws, but I knew enough to say it was putting lives at risk. Ceiling falling in? Paint chips everywhere? I gave him a laundry list so long I almost felt bad for the guy having to write it all down. Almost. To my surprise, the inspector didn't wait until I moved out. He came the next day. I sat by the window, heart pounding, and watched him walk up the steps with a clipboard in hand. He didn't knock, didn't chat, just started measuring, photographing, documenting. I watched him linger at the porch. He crouched down, examined the foundation, shook his head. Then he pulled out a tape measure and walked the length of the platform. It was obvious. This wasn't just a courtesy visit. He was here to build a case. Each violation, $500 per day until corrected, and I gave him a list of violations. I didn't stick around to see the fallout, but I didn't need to. I knew I had finally flipped the power dynamic. He wasn't in control anymore. I was. He wanted to squeeze money out of his tenants? Fine. Now he'd be paying the city thousands just to fix the mess he spent years ignoring. And the best part? He never even saw it coming. If you thought the story was over once I made the call, think again. See, bullies don't like losing control, and when they feel it slipping, they panic. They act out, they get desperate. That's exactly what happened to my landlord in the final days before I moved out. About a week before my lease ended, he showed up out of nowhere and tried to tell me I had to be out by a specific time. Not just by the end of the day, but by the hour. As if he was the law. Like he had the right to dictate exactly when and how I should leave. I didn't respond. Where I lived, the law was clear. Tenants had until the end of the lease day to vacate. There was no legal requirement to obey whatever arbitrary time he came up with. But he didn't care about the law. He never did. Then came the threats. He warned me that if I wasn't out by his deadline, he'd call the police on me. Said I'd be trespassing. Said I'd regret it. I didn't flinch. Instead, I walked straight into the police station myself that very morning. I explained the situation, the landlord's harassment, his intimidation tactics, his attempt to manipulate the law. I showed them the lease terms, made sure they understood the timeline, and asked that they document my visit. So when he actually did show up stomping around and barking demands, I was ready. He harassed me again, loudly and aggressively, probably hoping I'd just cave and leave early out of fear. But this time, when I called the police, they backed me up. They told him I was fully within my rights, that he had no legal standing to kick me out at that time. They shut him down, and you could see it in his eyes. The moment he realized he wasn't winning anymore, the walls were closing in, and he was out of moves. Or so I thought. What he did next proved just how far gone he really was. The day I left, I thought I was finally free. I had packed my things, made one last trip to storage, and planned to swing back by the apartment to do a final check before handing over the keys. It should have been simple, peaceful, the end of a long, grueling chapter. But when I returned, the front door wouldn't open. Not because it was locked, not because I forgot the key, but because someone had nailed it shut. Yes, nailed it shut, had I. First, I thought I was hallucinating. I mean, who even does that? I stepped back and saw the hammer marks. The crude nails jammed right through the frame. My stomach dropped. It didn't take a genius to figure out who was behind it. He had waited for me to leave, and then broke into my apartment. Not to steal anything, not even to cause damage. Just to trap me out. To send a final message. To say, I win. I stood there, outside my own home, and realized this was no longer petty harassment. This was a crime. So I called the police. Again. But this time, I didn't just want a report. I wanted accountability. I told them to send a supervisor. I was done playing games with this man. I was done being polite. I was done letting him walk all over me. By the time they arrived, he had already fled. Classic move. He knew he was skating on thin ice. He knew that what he did could land him in serious legal trouble. And this time, it did. The officers took my statement, documented the forced entry, and reviewed my previous complaints. It didn't take long for them to decide that this wasn't just a misunderstanding or a landlord-tenant spat. This was breaking and entering. A felony. They filed a formal report. And just like that, the man who tormented me for 3 years was now facing criminal charges. There's a moment when you've been pushed, bullied, and ignored for so long, where justice doesn't just feel good, it feels transformative. When the police confirmed they were pressing felony charges for breaking and entering, I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just stood there, quiet, breathing it in. For the first time in 3 years, I felt safe. Not because I was out of that apartment, but because he wasn't going to get away with it this time. I got a copy of the police report, black and white proof that his arrogance had finally crossed a line. This wasn't a warning. This wasn't a slap on the wrist. This was serious. He had pushed and pushed and pushed until the system pushed back. And that wasn't all. Remember that building inspector I called before moving out? Every violation that man documented, every inch of unpermitted porch, every pipe out of code, every unsafe fixture, was now racking up 500 a day fines. For a man obsessed with money, that was poetic. I don't know exactly how much he ended up paying, but the point wasn't the money. It wasn't even the charges. It was that someone like him, someone who thought they were untouchable, had finally been touched. And the best part? I never screamed, never threatened, never stooped to his level. I just documented, reported, and waited. Some people think justice is loud, dramatic, explosive, but sometimes justice is a clipboard, a knock on the door, a set of nails in the wrong hands, and the consequences that follow. He made my life hell for 3 years, but in the end, I walked away clean, and he walked straight into a criminal record.
You've heard the case. While you consider your verdict, the court calls the next case to order.
He tried to steal my kids, so I took his retirement instead. I used to think my life was on track. I was a young mother, newly married, and doing my best to raise a family. But everything changed the moment our first child was born. That's when my ex decided I shouldn't work anymore. Not asked. Decided. He forced me to quit my job, stripping me of the only financial independence I had. I didn't know it at the time, but that decision would trap me in years of emotional and financial warfare I never saw coming. At first, I tried to see it as temporary. Maybe staying home would be good for the baby. Maybe we could make it work. But over time, the cracks in our relationship widened into canyons. His behavior shifted. What started as condescending remarks and occasional yelling soon spiraled into full-blown verbal and emotional abuse. And that wasn't even the worst part. Some days he got physical. Not often, but enough to make me feel like I was living with a ticking time bomb. I began walking on eggshells in my own home, and I was doing everything I could to keep our children safe. When our second child was born, I thought, maybe foolishly, that the new baby would soften him, that maybe we'd start fresh. But by the time that child turned 2, I found out about his affair. He didn't even try to hide it. No remorse, no explanation, just another way to show me how little he cared. I felt like a prisoner in my own life. No income, no backup plan, and now betrayal on top of everything else. But the moment everything changed, the moment I stopped surviving and started fighting, was when he turned his rage toward our firstborn. That was the line in the sand. I could take his cruelty toward me, but I'd be damned if I let him hurt our child. So I did the only thing I could do. I kicked him out. That was back in 2012. I wish I could say the nightmare ended there, but if anything, it was just getting started. After I kicked him out, I thought at least I could finally breathe. But freedom came with a price. With 2 young kids and no income, I found myself cornered. I couldn't afford daycare to return to work, and I had no family around to help. Every day was a battle just to survive. I applied for every form of assistance I could, stretched every dollar, and still went to bed wondering how I was going to make it to the next month. And he didn't give me a single cent. When I asked him for support, not for myself but for his children, he sneered and said, "The courts haven't ordered me to give you a dime." That was the kind of man I was dealing with. He knew I was struggling and used it as a weapon. No money for diapers, no help with groceries, nothing. And it didn't stop there. He actually went to the bank and lied to them. He froze my accounts, everything I had access to, gone in a blink. And when I finally filed for default in the divorce proceedings, he lost it. He showed up and physically assaulted me over paperwork. It took months, 6 long months, for the court to finally step in and order him to pay child support and spousal support. The total came out to $2,560 per month. It should have been a relief. But of course, he didn't pay it. Not at first. He waited until garnishment was enforced through his job. By that point, he was already $6,000 behind in payments. But that $6,000 wasn't just a number to me, it was leverage. Because of his refusal to comply, I was able to go back to court and get permission to move away. It was my first small victory. A breath of clean air after years of suffocation. Still, I had no idea that this was only the beginning of a much longer and much more brutal legal war. He wasn't done making my life hell, but he had no idea that one day I would turn every weapon he used against me right back on him. After everything I'd been through, getting that court order and moving away felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I was finally free to rebuild without his shadow hovering over every decision. And for a while, things started to look up. A year after the divorce, I remarried. It wasn't something I rushed into. I just met someone who treated me with kindness, respect, and, most importantly, stability. Now here's where things get a little technical, but also where my ex made his next big mistake. When I looked over the divorce documents, I noticed a checkbox. It said that spousal support would terminate upon remarriage if it was checked, but it wasn't. That meant, legally, my remarriage didn't void the support payments. I assumed everything was fine. He kept paying, and I let it be. But instead of filing to get my share of his retirement, which I could have done during the divorce, I made a conscious choice. I figured, hey, spousal support was only ordered for 2 years. If I just take that first year of support, we'd call it even. At the time, I estimated that his 401k wouldn't be worth much more than $12,000 anyway. So, in my mind, I was making a fair trade. I was trying to be decent. I didn't want more legal battles. I didn't want to bleed him dry. I just wanted peace. And for a while, we had that. I didn't hear much from him. He was still bitter, sure, but at least he wasn't dragging me back to court. I thought, naively, that maybe, finally, we could exist without war. But as I was about to learn, the only reason there was peace was because he thought he still had the upper hand. And the moment he suspected otherwise, he went right back to playing dirty. In 2017, 5 years after I kicked him out, he struck again. This time from out of nowhere. He filed for sole custody of our kids. No warning, no real basis. Just a legal ambush. I was floored. The kids were thriving, we had a stable home, and there hadn't been any incidents. It made no sense, until I realized what triggered it. He had just discovered I was remarried. Apparently, he had no idea I'd tied the knot until he started digging through the court records in preparation for his custody claim. And that's when it hit him. He'd paid me spousal support during the first year of my new marriage. From his perspective, I had tricked him into overpaying. In reality, it was his own oversight. That checkbox was blank. Legally, I wasn't in the wrong. But logic was never his strong suit. Vengeance was. He demanded I repay every penny of that year of spousal support. I tried to reason with him. I reminded him that I had chosen to take that $12,000 instead of filing to split his 401k. I said, you got the better end of that deal. But he didn't see it that way. Or maybe he just wanted a reason to drag me through the mud again. So I flipped the offer. If you want that money back, fine. But then I'll file for your retirement. I gave him a choice. He didn't take it. Instead, he pushed forward with the repayment demand and his custody claim. When we got to court, the judge did order me to repay the spousal support. But here's the twist. The judge also increased the child support amount and deducted the repayment from that. In the end, I received about $20 more per month. So technically, I repaid him using his own child support payments. And just like that, the big custody push dropped. All bark, no bite. In exchange for 2 extra weeks with the kids during summer, he let the whole thing go. He walked into court expecting to punish me and take control. Instead, he gave me more child support and handed me the perfect legal excuse to go after something I had left untouched for years, his precious 401k, and trust me, that's when things got really fun. I'd tried to be fair. I really had. But after everything, after the abuse, the frozen accounts, the custody ambush, and the bitterness over spousal support, I was done playing nice. He had made his choice. He wanted that $12,000 back? Fine. Then I was going to get what was legally mine. I filed the paperwork to claim my share of his retirement account. He hit the roof. From the very beginning, he fought me on every step. He refused to sign documents, missed deadlines, and deliberately stalled the process in every way he could. What should have taken months dragged on for nearly 4 years. It was exhausting. But this time, I didn't back down. I was older now, stronger, and I'd learned something very important through all our court battles. The system may move slowly, but it does move. Eventually, the courts got fed up with his antics. They sanctioned him for his refusal to cooperate. On top of child support, he was ordered to pay me an additional $600 a month for a full year, just for wasting everyone's time. And then came the final blow. Contempt charges. The court had officially had enough of his games. Finally, in May of 2021, I received the retirement payout. And you know what? It wasn't $12,000 like I originally thought it might be. It wasn't double that either. It was 4 times the amount he'd been so angry about losing. I won't name the exact figure, but let's just say it was enough. To make him very sorry, he pushed me. Had he left well enough alone? Had he just taken the deal when I offered it? He would have kept his retirement intact. He would have saved himself from contempt, sanctions, and all the extra payments. But he couldn't help himself. He had to win. He had to punish me. Instead, he lost big. And I won without ever having to lie, cheat, or manipulate. I just let the courts do what he insisted on doing all along, handling things by the book. Just a few months before I got the 401k disbursement, he proposed to his girlfriend. January 2021. I didn't think much of it until she reached out to me directly. Yep, she emailed me, and not with congratulations. According to her, it was my fault they couldn't move forward with their wedding plans. She said I had robbed him, stolen his retirement, and destroyed their future. The tone was angry, self-righteous, and completely detached from reality. She genuinely believed I had schemed to take everything from him, and I couldn't help but laugh, because she had no idea how generous I had tried to be. So I laid it all out for her. I explained that I gave him a choice. Let me keep the spousal support, or I'll go after the 401k. I told her he chose the 401k route. He thought he could outmaneuver me again, and he failed. I didn't trick him. I didn't steal anything. I followed the law, I played fair. And when he escalated, I responded in kind, with paperwork and patience. Then I hit her with the part she really didn't want to hear. If he's that worried about protecting his assets, there's a simple solution. Get a prenup. She didn't like that either. She said she shouldn't have to sign one because I'd already taken enough, because I had made things complicated, because I had ruined the future she wanted. No acknowledgement of his choices, no mention of the years I spent scraping by while he refused to pay child support. No recognition of the court orders, the contempt charges, or the fact that I had bent over backwards to avoid this outcome in the first place. She was so focused on what I had supposedly done to him, she forgot to ask what he had done to me, and to our kids. But I wasn't interested in fighting with her. She was just the latest person he had manipulated with his half-truths and selective memory. What mattered was the record, the court orders, the money that was now legally mine, and the fact that I had finally, looking back, I never wanted things to go this far. I didn't want courtrooms or garnishments or sanctioned payments. I didn't want to weaponize the legal system. I wanted to raise my children in peace. I wanted fairness. I wanted freedom. But he didn't leave me with those options. He forced me to become financially dependent, then mocked me for needing help. He refused to contribute, froze my accounts, and used the court system like a club, swinging it at me anytime he thought he might gain the upper hand. Every step of the way I gave him an out, a chance to settle, a chance to walk away with less damage. But he didn't take it. He thought he could keep pushing, that if he yelled loud enough or dragged me into court often enough, I'd give in, that I'd crumble. What he didn't realize was that every time he escalated, I got stronger. Every insult, every legal threat, every withheld payment, it all sharpened me. It all prepared me for the moment when I finally pushed back, and pushed hard. And when I did, it wasn't out of spite. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about survival, about making sure he never had that kind of power over me, or our children. Again, he lost more than just money. He lost time. He lost his chance to move on cleanly. He lost any illusion of control. And maybe most satisfying of all, he lost the ability to rewrite the story. Because now it's out there, plain as day. He tried to steal my kids, so I took his retirement instead. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
The case has been heard. The stories have been told. Now it's your turn to judge. Leave your verdict in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe. The Court of Stories is always in session.